Our big story today, Tropical Storm Sally moving inland. It's been downgraded from a hurricane to a high-end tropical storm. And lots of videos starting to appear on social media showing the impacts in far western Florida and coastal Alabama. And there's Sally leaving Florida, moving into Alabama. Those winds 70 miles an hour and central pressure 982, which is exactly what it was during our webcast yesterday. Here's a look at the maximum expected wind gusts from the high-resolution rapid refresh over the next 30 hours. So what we see here is this swath of 40 to 50 knot winds coming into southeastern Alabama and heading pretty much for Atlanta, where they'll probably pick up 40 to 45 knot gusts. The extent of hurricane force winds should be confined to the coastal regions, very little of that coming deep inland. And you can see a lot of the values out in that part of Alabama confined to 40 to 50 knot winds. And this modeled area here is indicative of convective wind gusts. So wherever the storms in these spiral bands happen to pass over a city or a town, there will probably be some locally strong wind gusts up into the 40 to 50 knot range. So as we record this, there's the storm coming inland. Spiral bands passing across much of western Florida and coming up into Alabama and Georgia. And you can see the radars there picking up some extremely heavy storm total precip. These red colors correspond to 32 inches. Mobile, Alabama's radar is offline, but up until about 7 or 8 o'clock this morning, there were some patches of about 20 inches offshore. Of course, those totals inland have come up quite a bit over the several hours since the radar went offline. And the NOAA hydrological precipitation estimate through about 6 or 7 o'clock this morning has 20-inch totals over the past 7 days, a lot of that coming from Hurricane Sally around the Gulf Shores area of Alabama. And quite a bit of 10 to 15-inch amounts along the coast, and of course these values will come up over the next day. There's a quick look at our station plots across the area as of the time we record this. 40 knot gusts coming inland, and it looks like the gusts have subsided down in the Pensacola area. Also Mobile down to 25 knots, and values look pretty reasonable along the coast, only about 32 there. I guess that would be around Panama City. Up to the north, though, getting that 37 knot gust, and a lot of this area in here not reporting any data. But from the high-resolution rapid refresh, we know what's in store for the area out ahead of the storm track. Those 30 to 40 knot gusts should pick up through the afternoon into the evening. If we go to the MADIS Mesonet data, we can fill this in a little bit better. It does get kind of hard to read. However, these stations are not as tightly quality controlled, and you can see that 11 knot gust right there, that 15 knot gust there, that's from poorly sighted observation instruments. So you have to use these with a grain of salt. This 42 knots here, that's probably valid. And just for the record, this is being plotted by my own digital atmosphere plotting software. Hurricane Teddy is a Category 2 storm. It is not expected to affect the U.S., however, it will be heading for Bermuda. And there's a decent chance that Bermuda could get a second storm exactly a week after Paulette hit. And we're still looking at a very good chance of formation of this invest off the African coast. It remains to be seen whether this will recurve northward or continue into the Caribbean and Gulf. There's the current projected tracks of that invest heading towards the west-northwest, and that puts it kind of in the same general area as Teddy. However, if we look at the GFS forecast, we can see Teddy right there and the invest right there, and we run that forward. Keep an eye on Bermuda. Bermuda is going to be that speck where I've got that red mark. And we run that forward. You can see Teddy moving actually kind of slowly up in that area. See, we're already at Sunday and Monday. And finally, it brings the hurricane past Bermuda around Wednesday. Looks pretty well developed. And then that heads back out into the North Atlantic. The tropical cyclone Invest behind it, located right there, you can see that there's really not much development. Kind of closes off for a little bit and then opens back up around Monday or Tuesday, and then it kind of falls apart. So not too sure what's going to happen with that. Now out in the Gulf of Mexico, well, there goes Sally heading on out, but keep an eye on this area here south of Louisiana. If we run that forward, you can see some troughiness out in that area, and right around Saturday or Sunday, we get this cyclone developing south of Louisiana. Kind of moves up towards the Louisiana coast, kind of weak, kind of like a disturbance, maybe a weak tropical storm, and then drifts towards the west, towards the Texas coast. And then we get up to about Thursday or Friday, and that disappears and gets carried up in the southerly flow. The European model has a different solution on that. So, Hurricane Teddy located right there, Bermuda located right there, and the Invest right there. So we go forward. Teddy makes its move up towards Bermuda, arrives a little faster than the GFS, passing there around Monday, and then recurves. Well, actually, that hits the Canadian Maritimes. The Invest off the African coast, not going for very much development, similar to what the GFS showed. You can see that takes a little bit more northerly track and then dissipates. And then the question for the Gulf. Well, there's Sally heading up into the Alabama, Georgia area, and what we see is more development towards the south. That comes together southeast of Brownsville and then moves slowly up the Texas coast. So that's going to be towards the next Friday. It's not really clear on what kind of development we're going to have, but the European track record has actually been pretty good. So we may be looking at some sort of tropical cyclone off the Texas coast late next week. And there's pivotal weather where we can get a close-up look at the European solution. You can see that storm coming together there southeast of Brownsville around Saturday or Sunday. Sits out there for a few days and then kind of drifts very slowly northward around Wednesday or Thursday. You can see those pressures are not terribly low. This is probably a strong tropical storm. Kind of a weak hurricane, maybe Category 1, Category 2. But, of course, it's too early to call intensities. What we do know is that the waters out here should be active late next week. We have burned through almost all of the hurricane names. All of these are all used up, and that leaves Wilfred. So yeah, that's going to be the next one. So if that next Gulf of Mexico storm comes together next week, that will probably be Wilfred or Alpha. The surface map for the southeastern U.S. showing Sally moving inland into southern Alabama, starting to interact with that old cold front that's stretching across the southeastern U.S. and the other part of that cold front, which is along the Texas coast, extending deep into Mexico. Up to the north, we have this ridge of high pressure from Kansas up to Ohio, and that's creating kind of a weak northerly flow throughout Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas. Some slightly drier air being entrained into Sally, but you can see further west, we've got 70s dew points all the way back into East Texas. And there's the satellite loop showing the storm moving inland and rapidly losing strength. Not much else to say about that, but yeah, those convective precipitation bands moving up into western Georgia, eastern Alabama, and towards Atlanta. In the northeastern U.S., very nice weather and pretty dry. In between the clouds, we've got this smudgy cloud texture you can see, that's actually smoke from the California wildfires. That's made it across the country over the past week. And then further up north, this looks like a reinfusion of cold air coming south. This has the appearance of isentropic lift and maybe some cold air advection, some convective elements back there in behind it. So we'll look for that on the surface map. And there it is, just as expected. Cold front moving into northern Michigan, Chicago, and far northern Missouri. Back behind it, the air mass is not terribly cold. There are 40s and 50s up in Ontario, but in Minnesota, 60s. Out ahead of it, kind of a dry air mass, so we're not going to be seeing much in the way of thunderstorms or anything like that. And then up in Maine and New Hampshire, warm front moving into that area, bringing the temperatures up just a little bit. There's the northwestern U.S. this afternoon. The high plains dominated by this high pressure area, 1028 millibar high. To the west of there, some very weak upslope flow in Montana. And moving out further to the west, we don't see very much going on. Looks like a heat low out there in Washington and down into the California valleys. And a little heat trough there along the length of that low. Fortunately, the pressure gradients don't look very strong at all, so that will help contain the wildfire risk just a little bit. Clear skies on the satellite loop, and looks like the smoke has gotten a little bit better. Definitely a different picture compared to last week. I do see right here, that's probably not smoke. That looks like lee side cloud layers. So probably some humid flow moving through that region. Does look like the wildfires in northwestern California are still burning. And throughout the Great Basin and Rocky Mountain region, we've got anticyclonic flow with cloud formations moving like that. And it's also quiet in the southwestern U.S. The fires in central and southern California, they look like they've improved also. Looks like one little patch there around the Sequoia fire still going. But in the southern Rockies, looks like the moisture has picked back up. Got cumulus and towering cumulus going up on the higher elevations, and we can see it looks like some northeasterly flow working across that area. And there's our weather map for the southwestern U.S. Fresh outbreak of polar air moving through eastern Colorado. You notice that I did not bring that all the way into the Texas Panhandle because this all looks like the same air mass. 85 over 53 at Lubbock with 83 over 53 at Guyman. So even though the winds are out of the north, that to me is not a valid indicator of an air mass change. Now, I could bring the front maybe a little further south, maybe into Raton, but that 81 there at Pueblo, that looks to be maybe a recent frontal passage with the winds picking up and getting gusty. That does not look like it's back there deep into the cold air. In Phoenix, 98 degrees there, 102 there at Lake Havasu City. So the heat is back up for the southwestern U.S., and then it looks like the San Joaquin Valley. Still some residual smoke in that area, and a very weak low-pressure trough due to the continued strong heating. A quick look at our hemispherics using the GFS model up at the top of the troposphere shows the main westerlies way up there in Canada, and we've got a split flow pattern. There's the southern split way down there in Texas off to Carolina due to the weak baroclinicity through that region. And it looks like a Rex block type formation there off the west coast. Running that forward, let's take a look. Looks like the pattern does progress. Ridge moving inland, trough moving inland, and the very deep trough in the eastern U.S. moving out to the Atlantic. So this is going to be around the weekend. So it looks like maybe an increase in showery type activity in the high plains. Kind of some calm weather for the U.S. for several days. I guess we certainly need that. And then it looks like another trough approaching the west coast, and this one is quite deep there. So that should bring a change to the conditions in the western U.S. There's that trough snaking inland, big jet stream digging onto the west coast, and that's going to be kind of a stormy pattern there for Oregon towards the end of next week. And then moving on, pattern becomes more amplified, more meridional, and we get this trough shearing off in the Rocky Mountain region, and that looks to be maybe your first big Pacific system coming in from the Rockies. So that's going to be about the 27th, 28th. That's a little ways down the road. Anyway, it looks like that's temporary. The pattern, the prevailing westerlies have shifted back up north, but it looks like they buckle pretty quickly. Okay, so we may see some more interesting weather before too long. And then just a quick look at our forecast from the European model. You can see Sally coming inland, moving across Georgia overnight. And then we've got this little ridge of cool high pressure working its way southward, so it's going to be continued mild in the southern plains. That high moves out into the Great Lakes towards Saturday and Sunday. Very dominant feature there. You can see how wide of an area that covers, all the way from Texas up to the Canadian Maritimes. After that, European model thinking something's going to get active off Texas next week. That's still quite a ways off. And then looking west and north, looks pretty quiet. And there's that Pacific stuff starting to threaten the west coast there towards the very end. Okay, that's about all I got for this edition of Meteorology Lab. Thank you for watching, and your support of the program is very much appreciated. So please check out this link and become a supporter. Thanks, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.